I'm Brian McKnight. I teach history at UVA-Wise. Grew up in Lee County, Virginia, and didn't know much about Scotia. About a year and a half ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who's a doctor down in St. Charles, and he said, I've got a patient who worked the Scotia explosions, and he's got all these really great stories. He said, do you want to come talk to him? So I said, sure. And then we went down and we talked with JR and we talked with Gerald. And I was fascinated by the time we got finished chatting with them. And just absolutely couldn't believe what they had done and what Scotia what was going on at Scotia at the time. I tend to like writing books for some bizarre reason, considering all the money you make off of them. But I thought it was a really good opportunity to do a book on something that a lot of people didn't know anything about. The deeper I got into it, the better it got. And I always like bragging to these guys. I've written 210 pages since Christmas, so I'm doing pretty well. Usually it'll take 8 or 10 years to do one. And I see Eddie Nichols back there. Everybody knows Eddie. He's written 2 books on Scotia. And if anybody knows anything about Scotia, it's usually because they've read something Eddie's written. But I want to introduce these guys to you. These folks worked the first explosion and the second explosion, underground both times. And did it voluntarily, didn't get paid anything for the trouble, but they were doing it because they knew that, you know, in these cases, somebody kind of has to step up and do the right thing in those situations. So here is David Breedlove. He worked the first and second Scotia explosions. And Gerald Tate. Now, Gerald's kind of the celebrity of the bunch because Westmoreland Mine Rescue worked 5 explosions over the course of their existence. And he worked all 5 of them. He worked from Scotia in 76 to South Mountain in 92. Yeah. And Alan Wolfe, Alan worked Scotia 1 and 2, P&P, and Farrell. Yeah. So he worked 4 out of the 5, and he was one of the first members of the Westmoreland Mine Rescue Team, started in 1971. And J.R. Kimberlin, and J.R., you worked both Scotia's P&P and Farrell too, and you ended up being captain of one of the teams by P&P, right? Okay. So we've got a lot of experience here, and we're going to basically tell the Scotia story. I'm going to let them tell the story. I'm going to bring my iPad around every now and then and show you a couple of pictures to give you an idea about what they were facing. And the first one here, and most of these things, if you send me an email, I'll send you the pictures. But this is the one most people know, and that's showing these guys in a basket, and they're fixing to be lowered down that 376-foot borehole. Tell us about why you joined Mine Rescue at Westmoreland. Got any volunteers?
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Back in the time, this was 72 is when I first joined. But the reason I joined, I was working as a chief electrician at the coal mines, and it seemed like we worked day and night. I was working 16, 18, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And anytime you had a weekend that the mine wasn't operating, that's when we did electrical work. All the holidays, Christmas and things like that, I was always at a daggone old coal mine somewhere. And I noticed there was a bunch of guys playing in the field, running around with some breathing apparatuses, and they were going on some nice trips and doing some things and getting some time off. So I said, hey, that's exactly what I want to do right there. So I joined it. I joined it to get away from the coal mine, to get a little bit of a break. But I didn't stay there because of that. The reason I stayed there is because I had family and friends that were coal miners, and I'd seen what could happen, and that's what kept me interested in it.
Now, those of you who are curious, that's Gerald. Now, he hasn't changed much. But I'll show you a few before we get finished here, and you're not going to know who they may have been.
Gerald got a lot older.
He got, but he didn't. He didn't fundamentally change very much. That's the thing.
No sunglasses on there, huh?
Yeah, we're gonna get to you. We're gonna save you for later.
My regular glasses.
That was what you were doing, huh? Well, Alan, tell us what happened on March 9th, 1976.
Okay, I worked the night shift, so I was home in bed and got a phone call and said get to the mine rescue station as quickly as you could. So I jumped in my clothes, and that's what I wore underground when I got to Scotia, is what I had left home with. I got a pair of boots and a hat at the mines, at the training center. And we went to Scotia and we done our interviews with the mine officials and the state and the federal, and asked them a lot of questions, and us guys went underground.
Pass it over to JR. JR, what do you remember about March 9th?
March 9th, I was at work underground, running a continuous miner, and the boss come and said, they need you on the phone. I went to the mine phone, and they said, they need you at the mine rescue station immediately. And I said, where's it at? He said, it's Scotia again.
So that was the second one.
That was the second.
Now, David, you were working when it blew up the first time, right?
I'm one of the few sitting up here that only worked with one explosion. And I made a promise. When we were at the bottom of the shaft, looking up, I saw a little circle in the sky. And I said, Lord, if you get me out of here, I won't never come back. And these guys kept on working. I called it quits early.
Well, tell them about what mine you worked at and where it was located in relation to Scotia.
Well, my normal operation job was not as a foreman in Prescott #1. Well, hardly anybody knows that Prescott 1 and Scotia are only separated by about 3,000 feet.
Same coal seam.
Same coal seam, same characteristics. And after the explosion was over, I got to go back to Prescott. And it was shut down for 2 weeks after Scotia was over with. And I got the job of going all over the mines by myself. And Alan's father-in-law was my boss. So I think Alan trained him or told him anyway what to do. But both those mines are in the same thing. Both of them liberate gas, both of them accumulate water. And before it's over with, you'll find out how much that's got to do with both exploding.
Gerald, go ahead and give Gerald. What'd you see when you got over there? What was your first impression when you got to Scotia?
When we first got there, of course, as we were going over, there were a lot of state troopers, a lot of police officers that were getting us there. But once we got to the mine site, there was just total chaos. It was just absolutely unbelievable. A lot of the news people had already gotten there. How they got there that fast, I have no idea. The families of the people that were still underground, they were there. There was federal, state inspectors everywhere. And of course, the mine management was there also. But it was just total chaos. And really to find out who was in charge was a little bit of an appeal for us just to do that. And we heard so many different things. Like Alan said, we kind of tried to find out as much as we could before we went to head underground. And it was just really difficult to get the type of information we needed. None of us had ever been to a coal mine explosion before, so this was our first one at Scotia. And we really didn't know what to expect. We were young guys. We had a lot of training. All of us, 6, 7 years training, getting ready for it. We knew what to do once we got underground, but getting the information that we needed to be able to protect ourselves and try the best to rescue anything that was left. It was tough.
How did y'all get over there?
We took private cars, and
You go across
Dave,
the mountain?
I came across the mountain. I think some of them are different.
This is the second one. I came over from Stone Egg.
The first one, I think we all
Right there.
individual cars that came across the mountain. But there was a lot of state troopers that met us in Cumberland. We didn't really know what was going on about that. And I'll kind of get into this just for a second. But we were really, kind of alarmed that all these troopers were waiting on us. And they actually had almost one per vehicle, and sometimes they'd have one between us. Later on, after everything was over, we were back home. We found out on the radio that they were shooting at the rescue vehicle. Somebody was in the mountain there as you go up the valley towards Scotia, and they were shooting at each other. It turned out, JR told us that there was two brothers that were fighting at it, shooting at each other. But they didn't tell us this before they took us up there. So the moral of that story is, no matter what situation you're in, you need to look around your surroundings and kind of try your best to keep yourself safe. Didn't mean to get carried away.
Oh, no, go ahead, get carried away. You're the reason why we're here, so, yeah. After they told me that story, I started digging around, and, it's just a bad day to have a shootout. Timing is everything, and it was a bad day to have a shootout. And I think they ended up those guys ended up shooting a couple of cop cars up, too, along the way. And, police officers, they get real irritated when you shoot their car up. Once you all got over there within probably 2.5 hours of the explosion. All the mine rescue teams showed up real fast. So they were there quick. Mesa had probably only beaten you there by an hour or so. So Mesa's probably barely ahead of you information-wise. They're trying to figure out what's going on. All they probably know at that point is what they're hearing from the miners who got out, and they were thousands of feet away. So everybody's probably got a whole lot of questions early on. And as you go through it, you realize just how many questions there were and how hard it was to nail down some answers. So you all end up going into the mine. Tell them what you do when a mine rescue team goes into an exploded mine, what your job becomes.
Okay, we had two teams, team number 1, team number 2, and we went underground and got to where we could set up a fresh air base. And once we'd done that, my team started exploring. And you would just have to see, it's real black, smoky, you have very low visibility, and you make every entry that was mine, we made it. We'd go 4 or 5 breaks, and we'd come back, and Gerald's team would go in and ventilate what we had explored. They would build temporary stoppings.
Let me interrupt you for a sec. You go ahead and keep that. When it means fresh air base, you can be at that fresh air base without oxygen.
Yeah.
But once they step out of that fresh air base, they're under oxygen.
Correct. And you would go 4 or 5 breaks and explore, and then the Gerald's team would go what we had explored and ventilate on the return and intake side and move the air up. Then we'd go 4 or 5 more breaks until we reached the head drive of the section that turned left-handed, which where the explosion happened. And
Was you traveling in the track entry?
yes,
And you used some battery purpose?
No.
Or did you do walk?
no, we walked.
Okay.
But we was in every entry across that in mine. But we traveled the belt and track, yes, sir.
It wasn't safe to take any type of transportation in
No.
that area.
What we're talking about, for those of you who aren't fairly familiar with this, is we're talking about a mine that is about 3,000 feet laying straight out in front of you. What is it, 5 entries across? So you've got maybe, 500 feet wide, 400 feet wide, and it's 3,000 feet out ahead. They know the explosion happened down there somewhere. They don't know what started it. They know methane was involved, that's pretty obvious, but they don't know what the ignition source was. They know there are bodies in there somewhere, so they're heading in, and the belt drive that he's talking about is somewhere right around a 20-second crosscut. And a crosscut's about 100 feet, so we're about 2,200 feet in there. And it takes several hours, I suppose, to get up that far, doesn't it, Alan?
Yes.
Yeah. JR, when you all got up to the 20-second crosscut, you all got together and went in to explore and hopefully find bodies, right?
Right. Right. When we got to there, we hopefully was want to find survivors, but unfortunately it didn't happen. And they started finding bodies.
Now, the Westmoreland team, how many bodies did you all find?
Just one that I know
We
of.
found the first one at the head drive,
Yeah, they was,
and we was getting low on oxygen.
they pulled us out.
They wouldn't
When
bring us.
we were running out of oxygen, they pulled us out.
Here, let me tell the story. After all this happens, they have a lot of hearings about it. Most of them take place right up here in the courthouse. And one of the funniest things is the trainer for the Westmoreland team, a guy named Lewis Henniger, who's been dead many years now, 35 years now probably. Lewis, who was a very calm, diplomatic guy, when you get into listening to the testimony, he'll tell the testimony and then he'll say, "I've got something to say." And he really got mad because they found the first body and they were running low on oxygen. And they came back and they said, "Well, we know where we are. We know where the bodies are. We found the first one. We need more oxygen." And Mesa said, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to send in a new team." Well, when you do that, you got to have another briefing. And all the time, the clock may be ticking on another explosion. They don't know. So Lewis Henniger was fairly irritated by that. So you've got this long mine ahead of you. The explosion came from down here somewhere. Oh, real quick question.
I got a question. Is the mine rescue or anything pick up somebody that is familiar with the mine to go with them? To me, if I just go into a mine and I don't have a clue.
Well,
But if you pick up somebody that works there, the Joe mine foreman, section foreman, something.
We talked to them. We talked to them outside,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, during all these explorations, you've got to have a self-breathing respirator on. You have to. It gives you pure oxygen, hospital-grade oxygen.
Yeah.
And they're only good for the ones we had were less than 2 hours. So unfortunately, we did have some people like you're talking about that stayed behind us, and they would move up as we moved to Fresh Air Base to kind of assist us as much as they could. But as far as being able to go with us, they weren't able to do that.
They wouldn't train on the
And when we're
machine.
talking about the oxygen, that was one thing that really bugged all of us on the team. When you talk about the oxygen, they're small oxygen tanks, and we always carried extra with us. We didn't take them underground because they weigh about 20 pounds or so, and you've already got all this other stuff with you. But all we'd had to do is get them to transport those small tanks up to us. We could have finished that.
I know. A mine gets huge, and you look at the mine map outside, if you don't take the map with you, and it's huge, it gets pretty difficult to figure out where you're at and what you're doing.
I worked the map myself,
Yeah, we had that.
and we definitely took copies of the maps with us. We had every time we ever went underground, we had an up-to-date map.
At the Fresh Air Base, and I don't know what it was like initially, but at Fresh Air Base, you usually had 2 or 3 federal inspectors there, maybe a state inspector or 2. when the head honcho showed up, because Bob Barrett showed up from Washington and Kirkpatrick showed up from Lexington. When they showed up, they were there. And usually Scotia folks were there. So if you were in Scotia management, they were going to need 3 or 4 of you underground there too. So initially, by the time they're underground at first, I don't know how many people were there, but by about 9 or 10 p.m., about the time they're finding the first body, I'd venture to guess that they were probably about maybe 12 or 13 people at the Fresh Air Base who weren't part of mine rescue. They were just kind of there because they were connected in.
We had one guy.
Slow it down, they're not gonna speed it up.
Yeah.
We had one guy that worked with us during the first one, like you were talking about. He was an employee of Scotia Coal Company. His name was John Hackworth, and he worked real close with us. Of course, he stayed back behind us, in the fresh air, but he just did anything and everything he could to help us, give us all the information he possibly could, and really helped out. And there's a story about John that we'll finish later.
John Hackworth was at work at Scotia in a different section when it blew up. And it's kind of amazing because, I'm a human being. If I'm in a coal mine that blows up, I'm running somewhere. Well, the amazing thing about John Hackworth is everybody is running out of this coal mine. John Hackworth puts his stuff on and goes in. He heads in. And he gets in, you guys were around the 22nd crosscut, and Hackworth gets up to, he estimates around the 15th or the 16th crosscut. He gets within 600-700 feet of where these guys were when it exploded. And an interesting part of this story is they didn't realize it until later, but that first explosion didn't kill everybody. There were 6 guys who were kind of off around a corner who survived that first explosion and survived it pretty well. And what ends up happening there is they start trying to come out. And they come out so far, and they, it's smoke, they can't see anything, the environment's poisonous. And they get scared and they go back and they barricade themselves in and they end up suffocating back there. Well, the interesting thing is, if they had just kept going out, they would have ran into John Hackworth right out there. They probably got within 300 or 400 feet of him at some point. But that's kind of the way, you don't know until you know, and they certainly didn't. Hackworth's interesting because after he comes out, he's the one guy who can tell company officials, Mesa officials, state inspectors what's there and how far he got. So he becomes a really important figure there for a bit, and he's at the Fresh Air Base on and off because these guys say he was bringing everything they needed in, carrying in the materials to keep the ventilation going and everything. JR, did you all expect to find live miners?
Absolutely. That's the purpose. We never intended to find live miners.
And over the course of your career, you never did find a live one, did you?
Unfortunately, no.
Well, I'll show you JR. That's JR. Now that's been a couple of years, but that's JR. Do you remember him? JR says vaguely.
I don't see any difference.
No difference at all? Well, Lori doesn't either. Lori still sees it.
When was it done?
Okay, now let's talk about mine rescue teams. We're pretty blessed. We've got a veteran of the Beth Elkhorn Mine Rescue Team here. He was in Scotia explosion. And I'm looking forward to sitting down and talking to him and kind of getting his perspective on all this stuff at some point. Mesa showed up with a mine rescue team. Let me give the microphone to the most diplomatic person on the panel. What do you think about Mesa's mine rescue team?
I hope we don't have any Mason people in there.
Really like it.
We kind of got a bad feeling for those. They flew them in from Pittsburgh to Tri-Cities Airport, put them in a couple of vehicles, brought them to Scotia, showed up at a staging area. The first thing they did was pull out a bunch of boxes and start opening them up. Got the instruction manual out, trying to put a bunch of brand new machines together that they'd never seen. That was the Mesa team that we were introduced to. So we were kind of really disappointed in what had taken place, because we'd heard so much about them. But when they had brand new machines, I mean, they still had the tags on them, never been together. Those people had never worn a machine.
David, were you impressed with them?
What was the question?
Mesa Mine Rescue Team.
Mason Mine Rescue. Okay. They got there after all the work had been done. Okay. And then when they were going to do the recovery, they went in. And if you know anything about mining, you know where a section starts. They stopped there. They found some bad roof and would not go any further until it had been taken care of. Okay.
That roof's still standing today.
It's still there. They sent men in there to take care of that. They took a bolt machine up there, it was half put together, and the second explosion got those people. Now
you're
can-
jumping ahead.
Oh, okay.
You're jumping ahead. Yeah, he doesn't take direction real well.
Anyway, you got my drift on what they did? We're
Okay.
good.
So,
You mentioned that there were Scotia officials there. Was there any Blue Diamond officials there?
I don't think Blue Diamond was there yet. Most of the Blue Diamond people were working out of Knoxville. And I'm assuming that the only official Blue Diamond person there was probably Cornett, who was essentially the superintendent in Scotia and Blue Diamond. Scotia, FYI, was a wholly owned subsidiary of Blue Diamond. So it was its own company, but it was owned by another company, which happens for legal and accounting reasons.
Blue Diamond did their safety act.
Well, Blue Diamond was supposed to do their safety, and that becomes a big problem after the fact when they start investigating all this. So you guys head home probably around midnight on March 10th. You go home, you go to bed, and a couple days later, did they call you, David?
Yeah. They said, get your butt here. You got to go back. So we went back. How far can I go?
Well, get us back to Scotia.
Okay. We arrived at Scotia, and they don't know what they're going to do. You have to understand that Mesa took control of the mine. Okay? Nobody knows what they're going to do. And can I add this in?
You can say whatever you want to say.
They lied to us like dogs. They told us that they heard voices on the telephone, or it sounded like somebody was using Morse code to try to get a message through. And their decision was to drop 3 teams down the borehole.
Well, I'll fill it in a little bit. So what ends up happening here is these guys go home, everybody goes home, and Scotia and Mesa decide that they're going to go in, they're going to have to do remediation so they can get to the point to where Mesa can investigate this thing. The minute Mesa showed up for the first explosion, they, what's the term, hung a red tag.
Yeah.
They took control of the mine. It was their mine at that point. And with that responsibility comes a lot of accountability. So that second explosion becomes Mesa's issue, whether they want it or not, whether they deserved it or not, which they actually did. So they hang a red tag. They shut that mine down. Everything that takes place has to basically go through Mesa. And one of the things that I think is important to understand is you've got a lot of local guys there running the show. Bill Clemens was the head at the Norton office, and he was the man on the scene, the ranking inspector. So he was basically in charge at Mesa. But one of the things that I've learned about Mesa is that no matter where you are, who you are, the people in Washington are in charge. And you've got to be on the phone with them. You've got to be back and forth. And you don't make any real decisions unless somebody tells you you have permission to make the decision. That's kind of the way that worked out. And I got that from a district head himself who worked at least one explosion personally. Mesa sends those guys in. They're going to bolt the top, like David was talking about, and there's 10 of them, and 3 federal inspectors with them to supervise the work when the second explosion happens. And the 2 who escape were incredibly lucky. They were trying to do some electrical work, and they were on the other side of a rock pile when it blew up, and it didn't kill them. But everybody else was essentially down. If you take a look at the mine map, they were down the barrel of a shotgun. These other guys in the first explosion, when it blew up, it had to go around a bunch of corners to kill people. That second explosion, it was like a shotgun barrel. It just barreled straight down those entryways and got everybody. These guys get called back, and suddenly you've got a really embarrassing situation for Mesa. You've had the same mine blow up twice.
Can I bring up one thing? We're talking about going back to the first explosion. Once we had to leave, excuse me, I had the flu about 4 weeks ago. I can't get over it. But yeah, but when we had to leave because of the lack of oxygen, the teams that came in behind us did not finish ventilating that mine. So it was only ventilated to the place that we went to. Had the ventilation been extended to the rest of that section, chances are nothing would have happened. But once MSHA decided, hey, it's too dangerous to go by this supported top, they didn't even, for days, they didn't even pre-shift the section. First thing you do in a coal mine before you start work, you check all the sections, make sure there's no problem. Nobody went back to the section that blew up the second time after we were there.
Let me add a little something.
They went in and rescued the bodies, but you don't rescue bodies under oxygen. You should never do that. That's a recovery operation. The rescue is to go in there and try to rescue the people and ventilate the mine, make it safe for our people to work in.
Scotia had a lot of problems. It was a Blue Diamond mine. Blue Diamond operated on the edge of the law if they were lucky. I grew up in Lee County, Virginia, and St. Charles is in Lee County, and Blue Diamond operated most of what was in St. Charles. And growing up there, I asked my dad, who mined all around, he said, I would never take a job in St. Charles. He said there's safer places to work. They just didn't invest in it. One of the things you find out about Scotia had a union. But now they started out, they had UMWA, but they didn't want UMWA. And they had the Southern Labor Union. They didn't want the Southern Labor Union. And they ended up with the Scotia Employees Association, which the contract talked an awful lot about pay and benefits, but it didn't say a doggone thing about safety. And that's the way the company generally wanted it.
Well, I'll go back on that. Scotia was a good a place, and Blue Diamond run a good a mines as any of the rest of these people. The only thing is they got caught with their birches down.
Well, they sure did.
And the only thing changed all that was that explosion.
Well, now they were written up hundreds of times, and a lot of people are getting written up. Well, I can see that. I can see that. But, yeah.
After it blew up, I was in a store up at McRoberts, and this woman said, "It's a shame how they done over there." I said, "What?" I said, "They had 30-some violations." And I said, "What was the violations on? Was it roof and river ventilation?" She said, "Well, I don't know, but there was 30-some violations." I said, "There could have been a fire extinguisher light up today."
Well,
No,
Porta
no,
potty.
Yeah,
Now,
in the bathhouse.
Now, what we can argue is that a lot of what caused that Scotia explosion was pretty inexcusable. And one of the things that grabs me is when they did the Coal Act in 1969, they very specifically outlined what you could have operating underground. And you could have a lot of different machinery operating underground provided it was in a ventilated section. But now the area that this machinery was operating in was theoretically a ventilated section, but in reality it had been sealed off collecting methane for a month and a half. So it wasn't actually a ventilated section. The piece of equipment that I'm talking about is a old locomotive, 1942, 1943 model, Goodman locomotive. And Eddie and I and JR went over to Scotia not too long ago, and Eddie was familiar with the locomotive. What the locomotive had, it had air brakes, and every now and then it would bleed off enough air that it would have to kick that air compressor on to pump the air brakes back up.
It was battery operated.
It was battery operated, and when it kicked on, it threw a visible spark, which I'm a history professor. I don't know a doggone thing about coal mining, but you ain't going to get me nowhere near methane gas and a visible spark. That was the argument they were making, though, that it was actually a ventilated, active working area, but it actually wasn't. They had sealed it off. And that was part of what Scotia was doing. Scotia was making the argument, and they were making the argument that we are legal, but when you start looking into the argument they're making, they clearly weren't legal. So the second explosion takes place. They send mine rescue teams, and Leonard Fleming may have been one of them, that sent them in the portal entry, but they can't get there. This explosion takes place about 3.5 miles inside the mountain. So it's a long distance, and this was a much more powerful explosion. So, David, how did they get you down there?
Does anybody know where Eolia is? Okay. Scotia put a shaft down, a ventilation shaft, and they had a crane that they dropped supplies down with. Well, the crane would only hold about 3 men. When you got a machine on, it takes a lot of room. And they dropped us down 3 or maybe 4 at a time to get us all down to the bottom.
I'm going to show them a picture real quick. Now that right there is a picture that ended up in Time magazine. And this guy who has his back to you here, he was supposed to be here, but he got a new phone, and we don't know if he knows how to operate a new phone yet. But the guy you can barely see in the very back is him, with his back to you. How deep was that shaft?
360 feet.
It sure seemed a lot further than that when we were going down.
But there was one thing about the crane that you need to know. It had about a 5/8, 3/4 inch roll, and we felt it was safe. But as it went down, there was one tooth missing off of one gear. You get this little drop, and then it catches again, and then you go on down.
Not only was it catching and going down, it didn't have a swivel hook on the end of it. So every time the cable came off the reel, that thing that we were on turned 360 degrees.
In normal operation, was you allowed to lower men down with that crane?
No.
I wouldn't think so, no.
Well, see, Hampshire, on Mesa, is violating the law just like everybody
Well,
else.
we were as guilty as anybody. It was an emergency situation, and what we were trying to do is hopefully find some people that were still alive. So, us as the mine rescue team, we took that risk, unfortunately.
Well, let's get his question real quick.
Your information on Scotia is wrong.
Okay.
It was originally Scotia Coal Company. It
Yeah.
wasn't Blue Diamond.
Well, Blue Diamond owns Scotia.
Well, let me finish.
Yeah.
Blue Diamond was Leatherwood. Scotia was Scotia Coal Company. It was never United Mine Workers.
Yeah, it was.
No, it wasn't. Scotia was.
I mean, you can say whatever you want, but I know what I know.
Well, I'm Secretary of the Union.
Okay. It was
It
United
was-
Mine
it
Workers
was-
in the early 60s.
It was, what was it?
Email me.
It was Southern Labor first.
Yeah. And then
it was
UMWA.
Scotia Employees Association.
Just email me. I'll send you what I got. Hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm okay with it. But I've
Then
got.
they changed Scotia Coal Company.
Okay.
After the explosion, they changed it to Blue Diamond Coal Company. And then about 6 months later, they changed it to Blue Diamond Mine.
A while ago, I told you people that they lied to us. Now, I didn't describe who lied. And this was at the second explosion, and Mesa was in charge. So you figure out who they is.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not down in United Mine Workers. My dad worked at Bethlehem. I had a bunch of family that worked at Bethlehem. And the Scotia Employees Association never talked bad about United Mine Workers because they was the reason that we was allowed to exist and still exist today.
One of the things that I didn't mention when I was talking about Scotia Employee Association is a lot of people, particularly now, people say, well, why would anybody go to work at Scotia if it's fairly dangerous? It's a gassy mine, one of the few in eastern Kentucky. And the top two mines were not gassy. They were relatively safe in comparison. And why would they do it? Well, one of the things that Blue Diamond / Scotia did was they outpaid everybody. The maximum wage with that UMWA contract at the time was $57 a day, and Scotia was paying people $62, and all the overtime you can work. So there's a lot of reason for a young man to go to work at Scotia if he needs to get ahead a little bit. And generally speaking, what Blue Diamond Scotia, their philosophy was on safety is you guys can handle your own safety. You know, be safe, be safe workers, and you can handle it yourself. Kind of a hands-off approach. So they drop you down this hole. And one of the things that always kind of struck me is you've got three folks at the bottom of the hole already. You got Bill Clemens, you got another Mesa inspector, and you've got the McKnight guy who's the Scotia Employee Union president. They drop both of your teams down. That's what, 12 people? And you're only able to go down 3 at a time. You're going 400 feet down and then bringing it back 400 feet. It had to take 45 minutes or so to get everybody from top to bottom.
I'm not sure about the time. We were so into trying to decide what we were going to do once we got there. We were looking at the maps and doing everything else. But it did take quite a bit of time to get down there. So, and it was a tough thing, like I say. And luckily, those 3 guys were down there because that thing spinning. By the time I got down there, I wasn't able to. I couldn't have gotten myself off of it. And they actually landed on some boards over a water hole. And if they hadn't had help me get off there, I don't know what I would have done. But it did take quite a while by the time you dropped 3 people down, brought the crane back up, and then dropped it back down again. And I was on one of the first trips going down, and they told us, they gave us, of course we had lights, but they said be real careful. So far down through there's a rod sticking out. You kind of push yourself away from that rod as you go by. So I mean, you know, not only were we already scared to death, but we were facing that, didn't know what we were going to face. But it was a slow process in getting us underground during that time.
And they were scouting it to try to figure out, what the conditions were. Alan, talk about how far away you were once you got down to the bottom from where you had to go.
It wasn't over 5 or 6 breaks, cross cuts, which probably about 500 feet. It didn't take long. And
It was a little bit further than that, because we took 500 feet of
Lifeline.
phone line.
Huh?
We took 500 feet of phone line. We ran it. Probably about
That's
that.
49 years ago.
So they had y'all kind of,
We all, both teams went together. We were told to go find the bodies or find anybody that was alive, and they were all dead. We marked them on our map, and they said, "Get the hell back out of there." That's the very words they told us.
JR, how excited were you to come back?
I was worried about that crane gonna take me back up out of the hole.
So were y'all in a full sprint to get back?
We was moving on.
I bet you were. And then you have to stand at the bottom of the hole and wait for your turn to go up.
Wait for your turn. And the whole time you're standing there, you're dreading it. And we had two men on the way back to the bottom of the shaft. Wendell Collinsworth was one of the team members, and he was moving on. He was ahead of everybody. When Bowen hollered and told him to wait up, Wendell, hold up. He thought he said it was blowing up. And he jumped over in the crosscut. When he realized that what he was saying, he come out of there mad. He told Wendell, when we get outside, I'm kicking your ass.
No, we haven't showed a picture of Alan yet, but that was Alan. Now, Alan's changed a lot, hasn't he? Well, at least you shaved. You shaved and you don't have dark glasses anymore.
A long time ago, Brian.
So we've got them back up and out, and they come out. Gerald, did you map the bodies?
Yes.
Okay. It was Gerald's responsibility to map the bodies, being the map man. You guys come out, and what's the next step? You go home. What do you do for the next few days? Do y'all talk about it?
No, unfortunately, we were young and, just gun ho, I guess. We weren't all that smart, but we weren't able to talk about it. We went on and just kind of kept things, tried to block it out. We'd never seen anything like that. Like I said, that was our first. It was horrific, some of the things we saw. When we came outside after the first explosion, I think it was after the first one. It's been so long, I kind of get them confused. But one of the worst things I ever saw in my life, when they were escorting us back to debriefing. This little boy came running up. He was 5 or 6 years old, and he looks up at me and says, "Have you seen my daddy?" Now what can you say? It just absolutely breaks your heart. And you've got all these news people around you trying to ask all kinds of questions and all. And luckily we had the troopers are with us, and they kept those people pushed out of the way. But it was just absolutely terrible. I can still see that little boy's face today.
And Gerald, y'all were what, 25 years old?
Yeah, 25, 26 years old at the time.
Gerald's 28, that's 25.
Yeah, always been older. And for most of y'all, this was the first real experience with death you ever had.
Absolutely, and if you can imagine the amount of heat and the amount of force that those bodies withstood, you can kind of halfway imagine. No one will tell you what they look like. You can halfway imagine for yourself what those people look like. And we had to see those, and especially during the second one, having to map them out, you were exposed to an awful lot. And to have never seen that before, it was really tough. So it took me several years before I could even talk to my own family about things like that. We just kept it within ourselves, and like I say, it was tough.
Y'all found one body you recognized, though, didn't you?
Unfortunately, we did, and that brings us back to the guy that really helped us a lot during the first explosion. Remember John Ackworth? He was about the second person we found. He was sitting in a supply car. Evidently, they had stopped over doing some things, and he was sitting in a supply car, and his face was forced down on the fender of that supply car. Eyes still open. And we remember being with him for days, but right before that. And there he was. So yeah, it was tough on some young guys. Our lives changed drastically during those couple of times. Drastic.
We had to mention what Mesa thought they heard. I've got a friend who was a Mesa inspector at the time. He was at Scotia, but he wasn't working Scotia. He knew Bill Clemens, who was in charge of that operation there, and knew him very well, preached his funeral, actually. And he said that Bill Clemens had shown up that day with a stethoscope to listen to the phone. And that the way he put it was he listened and he hoped and he finally heard something. And that was kind of, I think, probably a telling way to put it. He lost 3 people in that down there, and he was smart enough to know that it was going to be on his head. He was responsible for it in some way. Now, after y'all get home, how do you think Mesa treated you guys?
Well, we were told that they said we didn't go to the bodies. So, they sealed the mines. Once it was unsealed and they got to those bodies, there was our captain's initials, time, date, and everything right there on the supply car, on the top, on the ribs. It was all there.
Well,
let me say one more thing.
Go ahead.
On these explosions, when something like that happens, somebody did not do their job. Somebody laid down on their job. So, that's all I got to say.
The Bill Person, who was the captain of Allen's team, and Bill's still alive, 89 years old.
Be 89 next month.
Be 89 next month, and can't breathe for a lick, but he's still kicking. Bill had initialed it and put the date and time like he was trained to do. And the most interesting thing to me is when they finally reopened that mine months and months later, and they went and they found that, they also found Bill's footprint underneath it, which proved it hadn't blown up again, or that footprint would have been destroyed. So that's, I think it's a fascinating story, absolutely fascinating. And JR, you got anything to add?
I'm glad everybody ever got to see me today.
Yeah, we're all better for the experience. Well, to kind of give you an overview, and y'all probably know this, over the course of the next several years, you're going to end up having a lot of investigation, a lot of news print. Now, I'm a skeptic. I don't trust the world. So I tend to believe that everybody who did an investigation was probably doing it for selfish reasons, to make themselves look good, and you get into it, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. But you can't doubt the fact that when the Coal Act of 1969 was finally signed, which coincidentally was 1 year to the day before the mine blew up in Hyden, to the day, that Coal Act did more for mine inspections, coal mine inspections, than anything had ever done. But it still didn't do much. It just kind of got it started. A lot of the inspectors working out of particularly Letcher County, Harlan County, they're running into people who are not used to operating coal mines with these new rules. And a lot of them, they're mad about it. You've got stories of mine inspectors getting beat up. You've got stories of mine operators shutting them down. Pug Smith, who was supposed to be here with us today. Pug was a state inspector, and because he was state inspector, people liked him. And he said that he had heard these stories about this one little operation in St. Charles, Virginia, shutting down. He said he was standing there talking to a guy one day, and he said, the next thing you know, federal inspector pulls in. He said before the inspector got out of the vehicle, he picked up the phone and said, boys, wind it down, we're going home today. And you can't inspect what's locked up, and nobody present there. But that tended to happen. What happens as a result of Scotia is the Coal Act of 1977, which was an amendment to the 69 one, and it actually finally put some real teeth into it. And the Coal Act of 1977 is a good law, and it really does a lot of good. And you can take a look at mine accidents and fatalities from the 50s, 60s, 70s into the 80s. Come the 1980s, they drop off a cliff. I mean, the numbers are looking better and better all along. I mean, it's still a dangerous job, but there is some good that comes out of it. Hope you enjoyed it. We will take questions. And
one more thing I'd
sure.
like to bring up. If you stop and think about this for a second, between the first and second explosion was about 48 hours. When they called us to come over there, we said, you know, we're going to go in this thing and it's blown up twice already. So what are our odds? And the team got together and we decided to, you know, let's think about this. It's been 48 hours. Here we are about 14 hours in before we get underground. So we're going to take a chance, and we're going to guess that maybe we've got 24 hours to do this. And that was why you heard some of the guys saying that we were in a hurry to get back out once we found those bodies. But we really searched our souls before we went back in there, because we know this is the second time. When's it going to blow up again? We just hoped that we had that 24 hours.
How many bodies did you find? How many bodies did you guys find on that second one?
The second one we found 11. What was there? 11 bodies in there. We found all 11. They were fortunately within a couple hundred feet of each other. There were like 2 together, 3 or 4 here, and 2 or 3 other places. We were real fortunate in finding those. I could talk about one of the other explosions I went into, totally different. We spent about a good 2 hours trying to find one body after we locate all of them except one. And it happened to be a foreman that was blown away from where he was standing. He went in by some of the supports. But we were lucky after the second one at Scotia, we were able to locate those fairly quickly.
You said something when you first started about it being chaos. I think I would have felt better 2 breaks in than outside.
We did. Once we got underground, everything smoothed out. Once we got underground, where we had some control ourselves, but outside we were really.
Everybody trying to cover the butt.
Yeah. And we were getting so much conflicting information, you know. But the guys that, like somebody alluded to earlier, the guys that actually worked there helped us more than anybody
I
else.
want to know the previous shift section on that crew. What's going on there? Where's it at? What's happening? What kind of equipment you got?
But unfortunately, some of those people weren't available. But we did talk to some of the Scotia people that gave us a whole lot better information. What we would have really loved to have known is that battery motor was sitting in by there when we went in the first time. But we weren't privy to that information, or at least not.
They were not so. Yeah. That's David Breedlove, the other one here. You look like you have a bad attitude in that picture. But a couple things to kind of connect in here. You know, one of the things Scotia didn't do is they weren't good about firebossing. And they ended up getting in big trouble because not only did they not fireboss, they then basically signed off on the book saying they did fireboss. And you know, that's one of the big problems. To give you an idea, you know, a lot of these explosions we read about, it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around how bad it is. I think somebody worked Upper Big Branch. You worked Upper Big Branch. I think it was Upper Big Branch. Could have been Sago. But I was reading one of the books that had been written about them, and they were talking about being unable to find a missing miner. And they said that after a few days, they could smell something. And the force of the blast had blown him into a shelf of the roof. To give you an idea, they had been walking under him for 2 weeks and didn't recognize.
Between the roof jacks.
It
It was between the roof jacks, and there was a piece of reflective tape.
Oh,
That's what caught their eye.
Oh, okay. So that gives you an idea about just the magnificent force of what takes place under there. I mean, when I say it's like a barrel of shotgun, it's like a barrel of a shotgun going off.
And speaking of Upper Big Branch, today is the 15th anniversary.
I'm a former employee of Scotia. I come back from honeymoon in 1980, and the mines I was working with Hazard had shut down, and I went to see Hard Creek and Freddie Maggard. I played senior league baseball for Hard Creek, and I think it was on a Friday, and Hard and Freddie said, start as a repairman electrician, so you start Sunday night. And bottom line, same mine. And so I see other former employees in here, and Bruce, yeah, his daddy was a second shift superintendent over there. Great guy. But anyway, you think the motor that was in the air pressure kicking on, you think the atmosphere got just right again, explosive, and on the second time made possible for the second explosion?
The second explosion, we definitely think that's what happened. What happened?
The air pressure got on that point.
The locomotive went through some curtains that were sealed off during the first one, and probably the methane was at such a high level, if you're above 15% methane, it can't explode. So probably what happened, they ended up going about 5 or 6 breaks past that curtain once they took it down. The air started coming in behind them and probably diluted the methane down to a point that it was below the 15%, set the explosion off. The locomotive stayed in that position. It was never moved. It was never checked, unfortunately. We never got there because we ran out of oxygen. But there's no doubt from what we've seen that the oxygen, of course, once you have the explosion, it burns up some of the methane, and then you get a lot of coal dust in the air. The coal dust is really what propagates the explosion. But that motor probably sat there. The air let off of it. It was kicking on and off. And it probably kicked on and off several times before the explosion. But it took that long for the methane to build back up.
So that's why you all just wanted to find the bodies on the second one, and then you want to get out because you didn't know.
We didn't know how long it was going to take that methane to build back up for the third time. And we like I said earlier, we said it was 48 hours from the first one. It's probably going to be a little bit less for the third one. So we're going to say that we're safe if we get out there within a 24-hour period.
I've been up on that section and seen melted bradish cloth and explain that belt line up there, what it did to force it. To me, it looks like a giant who got hold of that belt line and just twisted it and broke the jack, even the anchors in the ground. Can you explain that?
It's just the amount of force. Like I say, when you have an explosion, the methane ignites it. What it does, it burns up the oxygen, creates a lot of turmoil, and this turbulence picks up all the coal dust. And the methane explosion isn't over. All this coal dust picks it up, and then it explodes again. And again, it creates a vacuum, gets rid of the air. After the explosion, the vacuum's there, it sucks all this stuff back together again. And if you get the right mixture, you've already got the heat. You've usually got something on fire, whether it's radish cloth, some wood, or anything else. So you've got the ignition source. It continues to explode back and forth until it uses up a lot of oxygen. You can't suck enough oxygen in to blow again.
All of us that work down there, yeah, I see a lot of former employees here. Seems like that section of the mine, with the temperature was warmer. It was a lot warmer in that section. I think it's 2 south, maybe.
To
And,
Southeast
it was
Main.
just warmer and hot, it was hot up in there. And we know there that, you know, the curtain, trying to get more air on the section where they're cutting. And let that motor get behind that curtain.
Well, the motor, of course, the curtains were down, and unfortunately, had we kept, if we could have convinced them to send our others on the ground with the oxygen, we would have extended the ventilation up to that motor. Like I said, it's a rescue operation. You're looking to save anybody you can save. At the same time, you're getting it ventilated back to make it safe to go in and recover. Unfortunately, MSHA decided they'd do the recovery work open face. With the machine, I'm sorry.
Did they ever admit how foolish they were trying to boat top down there, you know, when they were trying to still get to the...
Well, during the second explosion, we had to go under the top again. It was still there, and so.
Did they ever admit that they were foolish?
In our opinion, it was just an excuse. They did not want to go back to that section.
I can add a little bit to that.
Okay.
In the Mine Act, and as far as I know, Scotia was the only time MSHA ever implemented was 104J of the Mine Act, where they actually take control of the mine. You'll never see that again. No.
Well, I've been to 4 explosions since then. MSHA keeps their butt as far away from them as they can.
It's
We learned our lesson.
it's kind of funny because you know, if you talk to folks who work for MSHA, if they go way back, they'll kind of sort of say that, you know, MSHA had like trauma because of what happened at Scotia, that MSHA didn't really ever get over that. MSHA knew that it had dropped the ball in a couple of different ways, but now at the same time, MSHA can't write out on a piece of paper, we messed up and got people killed. That's just not the way the world works.
If I was underground on a tractor or something, I would hope that your mine foreman and section foreman would come and get you before MSHA will shut down.
Yeah, well, hey, let me point out another thing for you, and I think this is really, really important. One of the most important things that comes out of the Mine Act in 1977 is making mine rescue teams mandatory. And the reason why they're mandatory is because the kind of stuff that these guys did at Scotia and the stuff that he did with Beth Elkhorn at Scotia. I mean, they really, literally changed how we approach mine safety by how good they were. And we're talking Beth Elkhorn, and we're talking Westmoreland, but we're also talking U.S. Steel and International Harvester and National Mines. And they were all really good. They had teams. One of the things I learned, these guys started in 1971. They were all about the same age. But those other teams, they've been around for 20 years. So you have young guys, older guys, middle guys. But the reason why we have so many of these guys is because they were on the newest team. And they all started when they were really young, all together. And you know, you take a look at Beth Elkhorn, and we've got one person left from that team because of how the ages were scattered.
Talking about Wolfe, he was that explosion. My dad, he had a picture out. He had a picture where he drove a Miami can lid in the 8 baked timber about halfway.
I saw that.
And they was on that section. There was some guys building some overcast and doing some branch work that morning. They had 55-gallon barrels split making mud stuff in. It wadded them up. They looked like you squashed a 5-gallon bucket. That's how much force come down that acre.
In 1971, when our 2 teams were started, it was the winter of 71, we started practicing the spring of 71. See, we had about 8 or 10 mines right around the Appalachia area, was all Westmoreland. And they had the foresight to see that they needed to start that way with the mine rescue team.
Prior to Scotia explosion, that it was a proven fact that within 24 hours after the explosion, it was time for a second explosion. They taught you this in retraining, they taught you this in mine foreman training. And the bad thing about, the good thing of Scotia explosion, that it did change mining. I don't care bad thing, that all mine laws are written in blood.
Well, yeah, and a truer statement has never been spoken. We see, if you go back through the history of mine law, we always have a mine law based upon a recent explosion. I mean, that's just the way it is. We get immune to them. We don't pay any attention to them at some point, but every now and then there's one big enough that it catches our attention, like say going up a big branch in Scotia, etc.
What do you all think about the changes in requirements for having EMTs on every shift?
I think it's,
We
I was an EMT, my wife.
Well, now they've reduced it now, so you don't have to have, isn't that right?
The Kentucky law.
I think
The
you should have
Kentucky
go
law.
farther. I thought you should have been a paramedic sitting on each shift.
In a state
Right,
in
well-
Virginia, we had EMTs
Right, in
on
Kentucky,
every
they
every
reduced it.
section.
Right.
Years ago.
I think it's crazy.
Right.
Then the law went from the EMT to first responder in Virginia, because there was a lot of part of the EMT that the miners didn't need, like delivering babies and all that.
Right, well, sure, yeah,
When
but,
they went to first responder,
Right.
it was the same thing.
yeah.
Through the state.
But the EMTs are great to have.
Yeah.
During an explosion, unfortunately, they would have been gone too.
Right,
But
right.
they're great to have as dangerous as coal miner is.
We
What
was
do you
not
think?
certified as EMT or first responder on that mine rescue team. All of us.
All of you
All
were,
of
yeah.
us.
I messaged a friend, a young man who is now working as a roof bolter in the mine over in Caudill County, and told him to come up here, and he said he's terrified every day that he won't come out alive, and he doesn't want to hear about explosions. But what do you think about the safety of these mines today? Do you think?
They're safer today than they've probably ever been. But, we can talk about the laws, we can talk about the things that Scotia did, we can talk about the things we did and everything else. My personal opinion is until the individual miner takes responsibility for himself, whatever daggone thing's gonna continue to happen. No matter how many laws you have, no matter how many people we condemn, no matter how many bodies we bring out, until the people take responsibility for themselves, we're gonna continue to see this.
That's just like.
Okay, Gerald worked 5 explosions. How many had smoking paraphernalia?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Definitely saw smoking from 3 of them, and fairly sure the 4th one there was people smoking. It didn't cause the explosion, but definitely 3 explosions I've been into were directly caused by smoking. And I have personally seen where the explosion happened at 2 of these places, where the cigarette lighter was still open. 4 out of 5 of the people that were killed in this is down P&P, 4 of the 5 people killed down there had smoking material on their bodies. There was an open lighter laying in the coal dust in front of them where they'd sit down to take a break before they started to work. And you could actually see the ripples in the coal dust where that thing had exploded, calmed down, exploded. There was like 5 or 6 ripples in that. The point of the explosion is where the least damage is. The further away from it's like he said, you're at the end of a shotgun barrel. If you're back here where it goes off, it's no big deal. Get to the end of the barrel and look down it. That's what these people were looking at.
Why do foremen allow them to carry a pack of cigarettes in there? Because they do too, right? I know. But I mean, the sad thing is, if you're the one non-smoker on your shift, and then you're.
That's somewhat true, but no matter what, for years the mine foremen searched their people and everything else.
They did at one point.
People would hide them, they'd take them underground and hide them over the boards. They had them hid everywhere. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry.
One of the worst things, if they smoke, they're gonna sneak off and smoke in the wrong place.
Where do they go to smoke? They go to return because they think that'll bring the air out, and the return's where all the gas is.
One of the jobs I had before Scotia, I was an equipment technician for S&S Corporation. And y'all miners, y'all familiar with S&S Scoops. But anyway, Scotia is the only mine I was ever at, where they didn't sneak and smoke.
Really?
But these mines were non-gassy mines. But if you're below the creek, and most of these mines, they didn't really have that. But I've seen people, this is the methane spotter, this is Scotia, but, you know, they take a test and they like, I still spray a liquid wrench on a rock, take the striker, strike it, and it'll flame up, and then light a cigarette off that.
So, yeah, I guess if
Scotia
you,
was a brotherhood, and these guys, I don't never know anybody ever from Scotia.
I never did.
It was too close. But now, did you all find any smoking thing after the explosion?
there was no mention of it.
We did not find anything.
They wouldn't put their brothers. Scotia was different.
Speak on behalf of all the men that work in that bottom mine.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
I said, speaking on behalf of all the men that work in that bottom mine, that they probably would have got an ice whooping if they had caught us. That was one thing about Scotia that people don't understand. That if you involve my safety, if you was doing something wrong, we didn't go to the company. Our union handled our problems, and it probably happened underground where the boss wasn't around, or if it did, it.
That's by far the best way to handle it.
Well, ever who tore that curtain down, tore those curtain downs, it ought to be, that's when your problems started.
Well, that's what you said a
And
while
left
ago.
them down.
Speaking that Scotia was an unsafe mines, anywhere in Letcher County you would have went and worked at that time, or Harlan County. Scotia was not unsafe as much as the next mines. Just like he said, we got caught. But it goes all back to the individual. Mine's only as safe as each individual is. Because I lie on the pre-shift report, I'm putting all these men in danger. But it's never to the person that did the violation. It's always they look at the company.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, they did.
one of the things that tends to happen, and this was a thing with Blue Diamond, Blue Diamond had a long history in Eastern Kentucky in particular, and they had a rough history too. A lot of places, particularly when Blue Diamond took over Stearns, which happened right after Scotia, that was really rough. And Blue Diamond basically came in and said, it's all changing, this is how we're going to do it. And the Stearns mine was an interesting one because it was incredibly popular with its employees. I mean, they really liked how Stearns ran a mine until Blue Diamond came in, and then it started coming down from the top, and everything started changing. So a lot of what happens at Scotia is coming out of Knoxville. I mean, they're basically saying, this is what we're spending money on, this is what we're not spending money on. And once it comes down from the top, everybody below them has to figure out how to adjust and make it work. I like the story about doing a methane detection before you light a cigarette. Now, that's a good move right there.
Yeah, that's a real good move.
But Scotia got a bad name from Blue Diamond. The men that Blue Diamond wanted to come to work at Scotia because we was a safer mines than Blue Diamond was.
It's the best place I ever worked in my life,
Yeah.
Scotia.
Well, that's kind of what Eddie.
Don't go today.
That's kind of what Eddie Nichols says too. That's kind of what Eddie says too.
Right?
Believe me, we're not down on Scotia or Blue Diamond. My dad worked at Blue Diamond many years ago. So
A lot of that goes back to your eyes, how much you cater to the federal government. Blue Diamond didn't cater to them, they hated them.
Well, it don't matter what industry you're in, you have people that are lazy and won't pay attention.
you got 10% of them that you can't trust.
Yeah.
But now at the same time, if it wasn't for the history of mining, you wouldn't have to have the federal government getting involved in it. Because, like Monongah, 1907, you had 362 people killed in an incident. And then Farmington is what caused the Mine Act or Coal Act of 1969. So in a lot of ways, and one of the things that I believe fervently about this is that, we sit around and we criticize Mesa or MSHA, but at the same time, a lot of these coal mines are just begging for it. I mean, they know it's going to happen. They're hoping it happens to somebody else at some other time. And generally, we don't want regulation. We don't want restriction until we have an explosion. Then we expect everything to be perfect for the next, 5 days. And then after everything gets cleaned up, people start forgetting about it, and then we want to go back to what we do. That's kind of human nature, but that's what happens. Any other questions? We're going to be around, so if you want to come up and say hi, listen. If you want to give me your email address, if you've got contacts or you're interested in a certain person, I've got thousands of pages of documents. So if you had a cousin who died in it, I can send you some stuff on them. Hang on, we've got one more question. Oh, you gotta get in line.
No. A little comment I'd like to make was, if you look back at the time when Scotia blew up, you could pull up in most coal miners' yards. It was very unusual if you didn't see a new trailer, a new boat, and a new pickup truck, or a new car. Times were great back in those days. Companies were running coal, production was way up there. Coal had went from like $5 or $6 a ton to $50 and $60 a ton. People that had the little mines back in those days, already in before that coal boom hit, was selling them for like $1 million. And times was great. Now, a couple of comments I'd like to make about the Scotia mines over there. I've been to the motor that was up the straight where Lawrence Peavy and Mr. McKnight was at. I was there. I went up there and carried them out. Let me tell you something else about Scotia mines. People love working over there. It was a good mines. It only takes one mistake to blow a mines up. The mistake they made was they didn't properly ventilate the mines. If you have methane gas and you don't ventilate, it's going to accumulate.
It should have been overcast.
Yeah, I've been to that overcast you're talking about. I walked through with that overcast to get to the motor. Now, when we left the fresh air base within one crosscut, I used the methane spotter like Robert's got right there. Last year I donated that to the museum at Jenkins. That, if you put that in over 5% methane, it will no longer work. The first time I used that, one crosscut, above the fresh air base, it burned out. From that point on, we had no idea how much methane we had there. But we continued going. And like I said, we went to the motor. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about, I'm going to call him Shaw now.
We should have just had you pull up there.
But, and I agree with the brothers up there. I know a little bit about the Westmoreland mines too, sir. Then that motor up there where it blew up. Now, when we got to the mines, we got the same information you got, which was very vague. We were trying to find out where the sections were at, how much ventilation we had, who's in charge of the mines. Nobody wanted to take charge. Nobody wanted to, with Scotia mine, nobody wanted to take charge. Now, you can blame Shaw and the feds at that time, but I think they thought that they could take the mines over because other people wasn't, in my opinion, doing their job. Now, when they took the mines over, it did explode. And I don't think there's ever been a mines that's ever been took over by the feds since that time. They don't want that responsibility. And Bill Clemens, his name's come up here. I always considered Bill Clemens Mr. Mine Rescue. He was a good mine rescue man, one of the best I ever seen. But I just wanted to make a couple of comments there, especially about the good times that the miners had during that time.
Well, I want us to talk at some point. because I think you can fill in a couple of holes that I've got questions about. Yeah.
These guys, other apartment here, we use torches and welders up close to them, you know, we've had to, and, but in the face, up in the main face, you see, this needle will go across, and if you do a test up right at the corner, this needle will go across. But we make sure we had good air, which was Scotia, but I worked at, we always made sure we had good air.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those things. We all know that you've got to take things like torches and welders deep into a mine, and you've got to operate them safely. But I guess that's how you do it.
I had to work on a power center one night. I took a gasoline generator, set right beside it, and generated power for a drill. You do things.
Hey, we've all done things. I spent 25 years in mine, and those are things that were absolutely crazy. And that's what I say, until we get the individual taking responsibility for themselves, we're not gonna stop this stuff.
One thing I'd like to say from here, all these mine rescues, that people knew stuff to do that they couldn't do, they didn't have control of it. Because my dad saved my life. He came to my house, I was getting ready to go to work for the section explosion. I started at break 6 from 2 Southeast Main. The day I started working, I worked up until the cold got so high the miner wouldn't reach it. They was getting ready to turn left-handed, and my dad and his dad, Bruce Jones, transferred me to Tiger Mine. But because I was familiar of working all that, they wanted people that had experience there. I had my bucket in my hand, my dad opened my front door and talked me out of going. He said, son, he said, of all the material that's out there, it's a proven fact within 24 hours it's bound for a second explosion. I get up the next morning and hear 3/4 of the guys that I worked with today.
What he says is really important. What ended up happening, they were mining in that direction, and the coal started turning uphill. And the miner they had wasn't big enough to do it, so they had to order another machine. Well, in the meantime, methane would collect.
The coal got up over 12 foot.
Yeah.
And that miner only reached 9.
Yeah, and the methane will collect up in that cavity and then start pushing down. That's the reason why there was a lag, and the reason why there was so much methane sitting there. It was sheltered in, and it was held up high, steady coming in from the bottom, and eventually it gets down to where it'll ignite.
Once you get coal dust suspended, it's like dynamite.
Yeah.
In the temple we had a disconnect box, about like that. Guy was running one night, he reached it, he pulled that, he blew the lid across there and out the window out the stock mine.
The USS Maine in Cuba, 1898, coal dust explosion is what blew it up.
Once you get it suspended, it's off.
Yeah.
Before everybody leaves, I want to say I really appreciate all the people that participated in this. We've done a few before and we have a lot of people that had comments, but your all's comments means a lot, a heck of a lot.
We appreciate you coming.
We wanted to come over here.